Previously on Hustler'S Hands. Double Cross City, Season 1, Episode 7.
Roar, block, roar, block.
A wave of relief washed over Gran, so potent it almost buckled his knees. But it was instantly followed by a crushing wave of horror and grief as the reality of the scene sank in. The sight of NIKKI, bound and terrified but alive, spurred Gran into immediate action. Without a word, he moved towards her, his focus solely on freeing his sister from her restraints. His large hand, still trembling slightly, worked quickly at the knots binding her wrists and the rough gag around her mouth. As soon as NIKKI could breathe freely, a choked sob escaped her lips. Gran pulled her close, holding her tightly against his chest, feeling the fragile tremor of her body. "We're here, NIKKI. We've got you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Vic, meanwhile, had instinctively positioned himself defensively. His AR-15, held steady in his grip, scanned the doorway and the shadows beyond. His eyes, usually filled with a warm light, were now hard and focused, assessing any potential threats. The silence in the room felt fragile, a deceptive lull that could shatter at any moment. "Can you walk?" Gran asked NIKKI, his voice low and urgent as he gently pulled away to look at her. She nodded weakly, her eyes darting towards the still figures on the floor, a fresh wave of fear washing over her face. Without hesitation, Gran carefully lifted NIKKI into his arms, cradling her against his broad chest. She was light, too light. He could feel the frantic beat of her heart against his own. "Let's go," Vic said, his voice firm but quiet. "I'll cover us." He moved cautiously toward the doorway, his weapon raised, his senses on high alert. Gran followed, his precious cargo held securely. The weight of NIKKI in his arms was a stark reminder of their vulnerability, but also a powerful motivator. He had to get her out of here. He had to protect his sister. As they moved back through the hallway, the earlier silence seemed to have been replaced by a low, distant murmur, perhaps the sounds of whoever had orchestrated this horrific scene. Vic moved with a practiced stealth, his every step deliberate and quiet, ensuring their safe passage. The distant murmur escalated as Gran and Vic moved deeper into the building. It wasn't just voices, there was a distinct metallic clang, the unmistakable sound of weapons being handled. Vic's grip tightened on his AR-15. "They know we're here," he muttered, his eyes flicking toward the direction of the sounds. Suddenly, a figure rounded a corner ahead, clad in dark tactical gear and holding a pistol. "Contact!" Vic yelled, instantly raising his rifle. A sharp burst of gunfire echoed through the hallway. Gran flinched, instinctively shielding NIKKI's head with his body. More figures emerged, their weapons spitting fire. Vic moved with a speed born of adrenaline and training, taking cover behind a crumbling pillar and returning fire. The hallway erupted in a chaotic symphony of gunshots, the air thick with the smell of burnt powder and the sharp crackle of ricocheting bullets. "Go! Get NIKKI out!" Vic shouted over the din, firing controlled bursts at their attackers. "I'll hold them off!" Gran's heart pounded in his chest. He hated leaving his brother, but NIKKI's safety was paramount. Clutching her tightly, he turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, his boots pounding against the dusty floor. The sounds of the gunfight behind him were deafening, each shot a stark reminder of the danger they were still in. He navigated the maze-like corridors, his mind racing, trying to remember the way they had come in. He needed to find an exit, any exit. The building felt like a trap, and the hunters were closing in. He burst through a doorway into what looked like a storage room, filled with overturned shelves and discarded equipment. A small barred window offered a sliver of hope. It was too high and too small, but it was something. Just then, heavy footsteps approached the doorway. Gran tensed, ready to defend NIKKI with whatever he could find. Just as the heavy footsteps reached the doorway, a ragged shout ripped through the din of gunfire from the hallway they had just left. "Gran, get out of here! I'm right behind you!" It was Vic's voice, strained but resolute. Gran's breath hitched. He didn't want to leave Vic to face these armed individuals alone, but his brother's command was clear. He had to get NIKKI to safety. He scanned the storage room frantically, His eyes landed on a stack of overturned metal drums near the back wall. An idea sparked in his mind. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Hold on tight, Nikki," he grunted, shifting her weight slightly. He moved quickly toward the drums and began toppling them over, creating a makeshift barricade between them and the doorway. The crashing metal echoed loudly, momentarily masking the sounds of the ongoing gunfight. "This way," he urged, pulling Nikki towards the back wall, where the small barred window was located. He examined it quickly. The bars were thick, but they were old and possibly weakened by rust. Just then, the door to the storage room burst open, and two figures in tactical gear stormed in, their weapons raised. But the toppled drums momentarily blocked their line of sight, giving Grand a precious few seconds. "Vic!" Grand yelled toward the doorway, hoping his brother was still holding his own. Before the armed men could react, Vic appeared in the doorway, firing a controlled burst that forced them to duck for cover. "The back way! There's a service exit!" he yelled, gesturing with his weapon towards a dark opening in the far corner of the room that Grand hadn't noticed before. Without hesitation, Grand moved towards the opening, still carrying Nikki. It was a narrow passage, barely wide enough to squeeze through. "Can you make it?" he asked Nikki, his voice tight with urgency. She nodded weakly, clinging to him. Grand went first, carefully maneuvering through the tight space. On the other side, they found themselves in a dimly lit corridor, the sounds of gunfire still echoing from the storage room but slightly muffled. Vic squeezed through the passage moments later, his chest heaving. "Let's go! They'll be right behind us." They moved quickly down the corridor, the urgency of their escape propelling them forward. The service exit couldn't be far now. A wave of relief, sharp and intense, washed over Gran and Vic as they processed the corrected information. Their brothers, Marcus, Jamal, Tyrone, Malik, Carlos, and Juan, had made it through the brutal gunfight, eliminating the threat posed by Detective James's goons. The weight that had settled in their chests with the initial news lifted slightly, replaced by a surge of fierce pride and a sliver of hope. "They did it," Vic breathed, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "They actually did it." He briefly closed his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of their brother's strength and skill. But the joy was immediately tempered by the stark reality of Antonio's fate. Their adopted brother, a part of their family, was gone, felled by a gunshot to the head outside the warehouse. The loss was a fresh wound, a stark reminder of the high cost of this night. Grand's grip on Nikki tightened. The mix of relief and grief was a confusing and painful knot in his chest. Their family had fought hard, but they had also suffered a devastating loss. "We'll mourn him," Grand said, his voice low and heavy. "But right now, we need to keep moving. Antonio wouldn't want us to stay here." Vic nodded, his gaze hardening with renewed determination. "You're right. Let's get Nikki safe." They continued down the dimly lit corridor toward the service exit, their steps now carrying a different weight. The relief of their brother's survival mixed with the sorrow of Antonio's death. The urgency to escape remained, but it was now intertwined with a fierce protectiveness for Nikki and a silent vow to honor Antonio's memory. The drive back to 8 to 9 Towers police driving by quickly to the warehouse felt both like an eternity and a blink. The city lights, usually a comforting beacon, seemed to pulse with the recent violence and loss. Nikki remained quiet, leaning against Gran, the trauma of her ordeal still palpable. Vic sat in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, a grim determination etched on his face. The silence in the car was heavy, punctuated only by the low hum of the engine and the occasional sigh. As they pulled up to 89 Towers, the familiar imposing structure offered a sense of sanctuary. The entrance was already bustling, a mix of anxious and relieved faces waiting for their return. Ra stood at the forefront, her expression a mixture of worry and anticipation. The moment Gran stepped out of the car, carrying Nikki gently in his arms, a collective sigh of relief went through the gathered crowd. Ra rushed forward, her eyes first going to Nikki, then meeting Gran's with a silent question. Gran simply shook his head, his expression conveying the sorrowful news before he even spoke. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The relief was still there, but it was now tinged with a heavy sadness. Ra embraced Nikki gently, her voice soft with concern. "Nikki, we're so glad you're home." As Nikki was being helped inside, Gran turned to Ra, Vic at his side. "We lost Antonio," Gran said, the words raw and heavy.